The body was posed like a display case. By the end, the LAPD had over 150 suspects and no answers. On January 15, 1947, a woman walking through a vacant lot in Los Angeles made a discovery that would consume the city for decades. The body was bisected at the waist, cleanly, deliberately. The face had been slashed ear to ear. There were no clothes, no identification on the body itself, but within hours the fingerprints came back. Her name was Elizabeth Short. She was 22 years old, and by nightfall, she had a new name, the Black Dahlia, not because of anything she'd done, but because of how she'd been killed. Exhibit 1, the precision of the cuts. Forensic examiners noted that whoever performed the bisection had anatomical knowledge. Not necessarily a surgeon, the record only says the cuts were made with skill and patience. The body had also been thoroughly washed. No blood trail led to the lot. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was planned. Exhibit 2, Elizabeth Short's background. She'd arrived in Los Angeles in 1943 chasing stardom. She never got there. Instead, she moved between cheap hotels, borrowed money, and the margins of the entertainment world. The LAPD would later describe her as a drifter. More precisely, she was vulnerable, and someone in that city knew exactly who she was. The investigation exploded overnight. LAPD detectives fielded over 60 phone tips in the first 24 hours. Within a week, that number had climbed to 150. The case became front-page news not just in Los Angeles but across the country. Newspapers invented details. Radio stations broadcast appeals. The public became a second police force, amateur detectives sending letters, accusations, confessions both genuine and false. Exhibit 3, the letter. In February 1947, the Los Angeles Examiner received an envelope. Inside was Elizabeth Short's birth certificate and social security card. The handwriting was cut and pasted from newspaper clippings. The letter itself read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Signed, Black Dahlia Avenger." The killer was communicating. He wanted recognition, and the police had no way to stop him. The suspects began to accumulate in the case file. A doctor accused by his wife, a boxer with a violent history, a drifter who confessed 3 times, recanted twice, a man named George Hodel whose home was raided after detectives found evidence of torture devices in the basement. The record shows he was never charged. Each suspect had a piece of the puzzle. None of them had all of it. Exhibit 4, the timeline gaps. Elizabeth Short was last seen alive on January 9, 1947, 6 days before her body was discovered. Those 6 days are almost entirely unaccounted for. Who did she meet? Where did she stay? The LAPD interviewed dozens of people who claimed to have seen her in that window. Their stories contradicted each other. The truth, if it exists in those interviews, remains buried. The LAPD brought in interrogators from the military. They used techniques learned during wartime. Some suspects were held for days without lawyers present. The record documents these interrogations sparsely, names, dates, denials, no confessions that stuck, no physical evidence that pointed decisively to one man. By 1950, the case had gone cold. The file was shelved, but it never closed. Decades later, new theories emerged. Some pointed to a serial killer operating in Los Angeles at the time. Others focused on organized crime connections, the suggestion being that Elizabeth Short's death was collateral damage in a larger underworld war. The record only says these remain theories. No evidence has ever elevated them to fact. Exhibit 5, the confession letters that followed. In the years after 1947, the LAPD received dozens of letters claiming responsibility for Elizabeth Short's murder. Handwriting analysis ruled out most of them, but some remained possible. The killer, if he was writing, had become a ghost speaking through paper. He could never be touched. In 2003, a man named George Hodel died. He was 91. Before his death, he'd lived in Asia for decades, away from American law enforcement. In 2011, his son released a book claiming his father was the Black Dahlia killer. The evidence was circumstantial. The case was never reopened. The record does not confirm this theory. It does not reject it either. What we know with certainty is this: Elizabeth Short was murdered. The method was deliberate. The killer possessed knowledge and patience. He likely knew Los Angeles geography well enough to dispose of the body in a location that wouldn't be discovered immediately. Beyond that, the record falls silent. The case file remains open. That's not procedural language, it's literal fact. The Los Angeles Police Department has never officially closed the investigation into Elizabeth Short's death. No statute of limitations applies to murder. Technically, an arrest could still happen. Practically, the witnesses are gone. The evidence has degraded. The killer, if he's still alive, is ancient. Exhibit 6, the lasting impact. The Black Dahlia case transformed Los Angeles. It exposed the seamy underbelly of the entertainment industry. It demonstrated how quickly a city's obsession could overtake rational investigation. It showed that some crimes, no matter how much attention they receive, can resist resolution forever. The case has spawned books, films, documentaries, and endless speculation. Each retelling adds details, removes others, reshapes the narrative. But the core fact remains unchanged. We don't know who killed Elizabeth Short. We have suspects. We have theories. We have evidence that points in multiple directions simultaneously. What we don't have is resolution. The Black Dahlia case stands as a monument to the limits of investigation, not because the LAPD lacked skill or effort. They didn't. But because sometimes a crime occurs at the intersection of too many variables, involves too many possible actors, and leaves too little physical evidence. The killer vanishes into history. The victim becomes a symbol. The case becomes eternal. This is the record, not the story, not the speculation, the facts as they remain documented. Elizabeth Short was murdered on or before January 15, 1947. Her killer was never identified. The case remains unsolved. And until new evidence emerges, evidence that after 77 years seems increasingly unlikely, this is where the file will stay. Subscribe. We investigate a new unsolved case every week, and there's always a trail that leads somewhere unexpected.